So what we have here is a 1953 Chevy truck cab that has been chopped and sectioned, and what we have here is the remains of a 1953 Canadian Pontiac, which is essentially a Chevy frame and rear body with a Pontiac drivetrain. So the goal for today is to attempt to put this cab on this frame. Now, I bought this Pontiac here specifically for the front suspension because the crossmember unbolts and it can be modified and bolted into a 53 Chevy truck frame. So that's the original plan there, and that is plan B if this doesn't work. This is actually the same suspension that was used in the C1 Corvettes. So yeah, Corvette suspension, Corvette motor, 3/4 race cam, full race chicken truck. Some of you viewers out there suggested that I attempt to use this frame rather than just graft the front suspension into the truck frame. And I'm kind of curious myself to see if any of this is going to work. As I look at it right now, I see two major problems with this working. The first problem, and probably the biggest problem, is that this car frame actually has a gradual kick up and sweep to it, whereas the truck frame is just basically flat across. This truck already has a floor in it, so that is going to create some problems right off the bat. The other problem is obviously the torque tube sticks up very high, so we would have to install a drive shaft tunnel into the truck, which is not a big deal because I did kind of plan the floor out where I could cut a drive shaft tunnel in. But the biggest problem is definitely with the sweep of this frame. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in this actually working out for us, but we're going to try anyways because, you know, why not? Okay, we just encountered problem number 3 and we haven't even brought out the tape measures yet. So problem number 3 is that the transmission sits substantially higher in this than it would in a truck. So to get this cab even like remotely on here, I would need to cut out this area of the firewall in order to give clearance for the transmission. And I don't want to start cutting this out yet because we have no idea what other problems we're going to run into. 3 problems without even measuring anything yet. And so we're not very optimistic about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the transmission and we're going to let the torque tube drop down. And that'll at least give us enough room, hopefully, to set the cab on here and see what other issues we're going to have. Probably going to be issues with the front sheet metal as well. So that way, we're not cutting anything that we don't have to cut, and we still have the option of using the truck frame. The reason I'm entertaining this car frame at all is that it's much more low slung, which allows me to get this truck much lower without doing any suspension modifications. The only thing we'll have to do is install some blocks in the back. But other than that, like everything else, this thing is going to be super low without doing anything else. So I do like the prospect of that. But again, I guess at what cost or at what point does it become more work to do this than to simply just use the truck frame, graft in that front clip, and go from there? That's not really what you want to see. Oh no. Not even really any oil in there. Just pukey, rusty water. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're pulling this transmission instead of cutting that firewall, because this transmission is garbage anyways. Now this car was sitting underwater for a while. Not really what you want to see. Oh, oh boy. Hope that caught that on camera. Leave a comment if you saw that coming. Oh, what a genius. What a genius. This poor thing is just completely done for. Barely even wants to turn. Oh, there we go. It kind of freed itself up, but like, holy man. This thing must have just given like everything it had left to give just to move it to 10 feet into the garage here. Amazed that it did anything at all, but I think its days doing things have come to an end. Well, it's getting pretty late here, and I'm gonna have to think on this overnight. I think we got some serious issues. Not surprisingly, the cab has to go a fair ways ahead, like several inches. See, that's not even close to being centered, and the cab is sitting about too low in the back still, so it's got to get jacked up. And then, you know, there's work to be done here, a lot of work to be done. So I got to decide if I want to cut this out and proceed on using this frame. I do like how low it is, so it's got that going for it. But oh yeah, and we're not going to be able to run this air cleaner, obviously. There's not much room there with all this height deleted, but we're gonna think on it, sleep on it overnight, and come back and reevaluate in the morning. Oh, it's the next day here, and this thing looks like a Homer Simpson car. Yeah. We may have just destroyed two classics. The internet's just like, yeah, I was right. Yeah. Well, we're not giving up yet, so deal with it. So even though this project is probably doomed, I'm just gonna zip this out because it's only just tack welded in down here anyways. So we'll zip this center out, shove the cab ahead, get the cab lifted up in the back, get it sitting a little better, see if the hood's gonna go on, and whatever else, and then we'll get a better idea of whether or not any of this is even remotely possible. Definitely you're thinking probably a overhead valve straight six. I don't know if it would work or not in here. I guess we could measure one, but you know, small block Chevy's looking more and more appealing as we get into this, but whatever. Okay, I got the cab shifted ahead a little bit and I shimmed it up in the back, and I just jammed some rubber under the front that I had. I guess I don't have any laying in here, but I don't know, like a 3/8 of an inch thick piece of rubber or something in the front just to simulate the mount. And yeah, we got the back shimmed up, cab shoved ahead a bit more, and just trying to see if the steering will work, and not without a bunch of modification. Yeah, it's obviously a little crooked in there, so in order to even get it bolted to the frame, I'm gonna have to cut this out, and I'm not totally committed to using any of this yet, so I'm just gonna hold off on that. But I mean, it'd be interesting to see what angle it actually comes into the cab, like whether or not it's gonna line up with the original there or where it comes out. I'm not sure yet, but I guess that's another potential problem. It doesn't really matter if we use the truck or the car frame. The truck frame, we still have to put a U-joint in the steering and modify the steering, so no matter what, steering possibly modified, not sure yet. Definitely firewall would need to be modified though. Well, it's actually a few days later. I've been working on other things, but we do have some issues here. Right now the hood is actually laying on top of the radiator, so we are going to have to get the radiator cut down if we go this route, but we have to get it cut down if we put it on a truck frame. So either or, but yeah, the hood's sitting a bit too high in the front right now, and it's not lined up with where it was before. So it's all twisted out of shape. So you can see the radiator problem here. Other problem is radiator has to get cut down, and you can see the fan here, there's not much room between that and the filler, so probably have to relocate the output dealy thing over here and just joggle the rad hose over, as well as cut down the radiator. So, you know, bit of rework there. There is lots of room in here still to get an air cleaner. The stock one won't work, but we should be able to still find a period correct air cleaner that will fit in this space here. However, if we decided to run overhead valve 6-cylinder, there's no way it's going to fit in here. It's going to be too high, unless we ran like side draft carburetors, which would be really cool, but way out of the budget on this. So we're stuck with Mr. Flathead, old Wheezy Flathead here, or small block Chevy. And I like small block Chevys, but not really what I want for this build. So I think what we're gonna do is dig into this Flathead a little bit, see if it's even savable. And we're also gonna have to remove the radiator so I can get the hood sitting down in the right spot. And maybe we'll mess around with the steering some more and see if we can get that figured out as well. Yeah, radiator is definitely gonna be a bit of an issue here. I guess we could always run a smaller fan blade maybe. Or, well, absolute last resort is electric fan. Electric fans just, you know, I will if I absolutely have to, but they don't look cool. They're not cool. They keep things cool, but they're not cool. So, the other problem we're going to have is just, I don't want this hose to do like one of these. Because if we end up with a big high spot, we're going to have a spot where there could be an air pocket and run into overheating issues. And so, I mean, the radiator only has to drop down like not much, maybe an inch, if even that. Something to think about whenever we're doing this kind of custom work is the radiator, but I think there's enough options here where we still have room to make it work anyways, in some format. So, number 3 is a bit of a problem here. I did put a little bit of oil down there, and then I did it again, and then it went up to 100, and that's all I can get out of it. So I guess I'm not a mechanic, but I think that would indicate rings. But without putting oil in it, we weren't getting anything over 85, and I don't really trust this. I thought I had a thread-in style one, but I guess that's all we got here. So number 6 is at 120, and this one we're getting between 110 and 105, and the rest are all 110. The way this thing was running when we got it going, it sure seemed like it had a stuck valve, but maybe that magically cured itself. But we still got always issues on number 3. So yeah, I don't know if it's bad enough to warrant pulling the head right now. I was expecting one of these to be like 0 or something, but I think we're just going to leave it together for now, and maybe, you know, now that we at least have some idea what's going on, maybe just some plug wires and plugs and rebuild the carburetor, and then just try running it for a while and see if it sorts itself out. And if it doesn't sort itself out, then we can dig into it a little bit further. But I don't know. I'm not going to pull it apart right now. We'll just leave it together. It'll be safer if we leave it together. I would kind of like to use this engine because I think it's interesting. So, you know, the other thing is, like, this truck's not getting driven very much. Like, we might only put like 100 miles on it a year. I don't have any plans to drive this thing, but I don't want it missing and popping and snobbering about or smoking. So it has to be kind of good, but not really good. Like, we're not doing a full rebuild on this. That ain't happening. But if we can kind of cobble it together so it at least starts and runs decent and doesn't smoke like crazy, then that's 100% good enough for this thing. But let me know what you think we should do. Do we dive into this right away or just kind of hold off on it? Believe it or not, this might actually work. Might actually work. And that being said, like, I don't think any other human is going to be able to fit in this truck, but that's fine. I'm building the truck for me, so as long as I'm comfortable in it, it really doesn't matter if anybody else is going to fit in it. Also, keep in mind, there's still bracing in this cab here that was welded in to keep it from flexing around, and so I'm actually going to be sitting several inches back from where I am right now. This bar is in the way, and I don't want to cut it out because there's still a lot of structure missing from this cab. Here, I'll get you inside here so you can see what the heck's going on in my mind. So yeah, I mean, if we're probably going to be running a couple 3 inches thickness for the back of the seat there, so once this bar is out of the way, we'll be able to sit a lot further back here. I'm not using the gas tank in the cab. It's getting moved out back, not for safety, but just because I don't want this sticking out the side of the cab. It doesn't fit with my design for the truck. The Pontiac is definitely wider than the truck, not really a surprise there. You can see we're not actually sitting on the dash right now, but we're pretty dang close, and we're not centered with the original steering column that was the truck. And now that I look at these, I never noticed this before, but they never actually centered the steering column in the truck to begin with, so that's interesting. So I mean, we're actually probably closer to center here than we were with the truck steering column, but none of that matters because we're not even using this truck dash anyways, so we can put this wherever the heck we want. The only other thing I was worried about is just you know, clearance over here, especially with the handle in the way, but there's actually still plenty of room for me to actually drive this thing and steer it without hitting or bashing my hand on the handle every time I go around a corner. So this will definitely work for me. Again, maybe somebody with a meatier fist won't be able to drive this, but I don't care about them because they're not going to be driving it. It's my truck. It's also looking like I can actually use the stock Pontiac pedals. Basically just cut a hole in the floor for them. Get the clutch dropped down now, but I don't see any reason why I can't just use the stock pedals. I don't even think I'd have to bend them or anything, so that's kind of neat. I suppose we probably could maybe shorten the column a little bit. I actually don't mind this the way it is. Keep in mind as well that the custom dash we're doing is going to probably stick out a little bit further as well, so we still need room for the column shifter and all that stuff. So as it is right now, I wish I could cut these braces out because they are kind of interfering with my entry and exit, but I don't mind the way it is right now, and I know it probably looks terrible to most people, and it probably is for them, but for me, I actually like this, and I actually don't mind a little bit more column stick out than having the steering wheel way up pushed this far ahead like you often would see. I just see this in a lot of old kind of hot rods and customs that were channeled. They just left the steering wheel long, and I think it looks kind of neat, and for me it's actually kind of comfortable too. It's in a good spot for me to hold the wheel and put my arm out the window and whatever. So again, this is all very, very early in the planning stage. I wish we could get a seat in here of some kind and we could cut these bars out, but there's just too much structure missing from the inside of the cab to risk that at this point. The other problem with shortening the column is as the column gets shorter, the steering wheel gets closer to the floor, and the closer to the floor, the less room we have here for our legs. A lot of guys would say just put a smaller steering wheel on it, but I like the big old steering wheels in these old cars, so I do not want a smaller steering wheel. I like the big steering wheel, so that has to stay. And I know a lot of folks, they also like to put in the tilt, big fat tilt column and whatever in these to get more room to get in and out. And for me personally, I actually find that I don't fit in them after they do that. I've had to sit in a lot of like street rods and hot rods and stuff at previous jobs. Guys put those big columns in and the tilt column and the big modern seats and everything. I can't fit in these old cars for whatever reason, but like something like this I can fit in no problem. So I don't know, maybe that's just me. Just standing back from it, and I guess we could stand to shorten up the column a little bit, but I don't know. we're gonna leave that to be determined. I guess there's also, you know, a vent window right here, so if I shorten up the column and move that ahead, you know, it's gonna be a lot harder for me to put my arm out the window. So for whatever reason, this right now isn't too bad for me to do that. So again, we're all just looking at all the various scenarios here and just kind of trying to plan out the rest of the build. It's always good to kind of mock things up and consider things, even though we're still at a very early stage. But we definitely don't want to be trying to solve these problems when we've got most of the fabrication done and we're having to, you know, this kind of hurts to do, but whatever. Sacrifices have to be made. Looking at this Pontiac dash here, and I see another issue. Just took a couple of quick measurements, and I think what we're going to run into is an issue with not enough room here, you know, for the column, because this is about 8 inches here and about 8 inches to the column from the stock dash. So I think we're going to run into some interference in this area. But I do like this kind of pod, so maybe what we'll do is we'll just take this whole pod, and instead of having it, you know, over top of the steering column, we can actually just kind of center the pod in the dash. So the whole thing would kind of be a modular pod in the center instead of kind of the way that it is. But I guess I think the dash is going to be a winter project. That's going to be something we'll figure out, because, you know, I don't really need to stand back away from the car to figure that out. So it gets pretty cramped in here during the winter. You got other vehicles that have to come inside. So yeah, we'll save this monstrosity for the winter. But I really like how all of this is laid out in here, and the big, I know it's taped up right now, but I don't want to destroy it. But this big clock in here, and how the speedometer and all the gauges are set up, I think it's pretty cool, and all this kind of rounded and whatever. So I think we're still going to try to use this in some way. Well, but again, future problem. So yeah, there's our super rough mock-up there. Lots of work to do here to get everything actually fitting and lined up and mounted and all that crap. But I ended up with this 54 grill, and I just kind of wanted to toss it on here just to kind of see. One of the things I was thinking about doing for a grill is kind of a molded bumper that kind of wraps around here, kind of like on the Polynesian, built by Valley Custom. And so I just mocked this grill up on here just to see, you know, maybe we do something like that with this, where this gets kind of trimmed down a bit and then molded in this upper piece, and obviously get rid of these. We'll change these to spell chicken, obviously. And then maybe just get rid of this bump in the middle, or leave it, I don't know. And then have this wrap around here, maybe drop it down just a little bit, just so there's a little more space here. But that's just one of the ideas I had for a grill, is to make the grill, I guess, into a bumper, and then just have kind of a molded opening at the bottom or something like that. I don't know. We got a lot of work before we start doing anything with that, but just keep the options open, I guess. And like I said, I think I am going to have to shorten the steering about an inch. I just don't like how far it sticks out from the dash, but we'll probably do the dash first before we even worry about that. But I guess, you know, the actual placement of the column, you know, and what have you is going to work. So that's something. Today on your useless history fact, the Rodden Custom Dream Truck, which was kind of the inspiration for this build. It's not a replica or even like a tribute. It was just the inspiration to build a custom truck like this. But anyways, that truck, it actually started out as a 54 Chevy cab that they bought brand new from GM. And what they originally were trying to do is they actually originally were trying to mount it on a 1941 Chevy car frame, which is very similar to this 53 Chevy frame that we're using. Same style top hat design, same style kickup. And the story goes that they tried to get it to fit on that frame, and eventually decided there was no way it was going to work, and they just ended up using a stock truck frame. I think they used a drop axle and just lowered the rear, and that's what they had to do there. And working with this, I can absolutely see why there's no way, you know, it would have worked. The only reason it kind of works with this is because this truck already has a homemade flat floor in it. This cab is actually already channeled like an inch or inch and a half or something, which allows it to sit down over the Pontiac or Chevy frame. If this was a stock floor, you'd never get it to fit on there. So it's interesting now, like I heard about them trying to put it on the car frame, and now it's interesting to kind of see the problems that they would have had to work through. And the other, I guess, issue is obviously just the height of the engine in these frames, the way it's kicked up in the front. Like, you're pretty limited as to what you can put in here for an engine. Cab on this does still have to shift ahead about a half an inch, and then we're gonna have to start building mounts for it and stuff, and then we also have to build mounts for the front end to actually get that all located in the right spot. Like I said, everything's just loosely kind of mocked together right now. Also, as I'm looking at this, there's a few things here that I see that I'm potentially going to have to rework to get this looking the way that I want. But before I commit to reworking everything for no reason, we're going to have to start kind of piecing together the box for this truck, because I kind of want to just get everything very roughly mocked together to get an idea of how it's going to look. And then if I have to start changing stuff to make things flow or look better or look the way I want, then I'll do that. But I don't, you know, we really have to get the vision together on this, or a rough vision of it, before we go any further. So the box for this truck, if you're new here, is going to be fabricated from the back section of a 1953 Chevy. And so we're gonna, you know, weld that to there, weld some other stuff here, there, everywhere. And the other thing that's gonna have to happen is this all needs to be sectioned. So we're gonna have to, you know, narrow it this way. And we're also gonna have to channel it down a little bit. And all of this top section is gonna have to get reworked. So that's gonna be the next step on this, is just kind of getting all of this hacked and roughed together and tacked together and whatever, just so I can see how it's going to line up with the cab and the front sheet metal. and then we can proceed from there. Just for the record, putting this Chevy cab on this Pontiac frame is completely stupid, idiotic, irrational, and it's making a whole pile of work for us. And there's absolutely zero benefit to it whatsoever. And that's exactly why we're doing it. Don't think that this is a good idea, because it is a terrible idea. The reason that I am even doing this at all is because this body is already so heavily modified, and it's gonna get even more modifications. So for us to get it low and whatever, this is gonna work good for us. But just generally speaking, if you have a stock truck cab and a stock truck body, there would be like no reason for doing this whatsoever. And I know some of you are probably wondering, like, well, if you're doing a chassis swap, why aren't you doing the modern chassis, like, and whatever? That's not my thing. It's not something I like. And what we're trying to do with this build is we're trying to keep all the parts older than like 1955. I don't want to put stuff from the 1960s on it. I don't want to put stuff from the 1970s on it, or the 1980s. I don't want any of that stuff. It has to all be period correct. And please just ignore the ugly radials on it right now. Unfortunately, I don't have any period correct mock-up wheels for this at the moment, so we're stuck with these. But hopefully eventually I can find something so we don't have to look at, you know, ugly radials on it. I am, you know, trying to keep everything on this truck, or at least as reasonably possible as I can, to, you know, 1955 and older. So I'm trying to avoid making any compromises or modernizing stuff, because it's just not what I want to do with this. Hopefully that explains that. I'm trying to build this as if it was being built, you know, in the early to mid 50s by a customizer or whatever back then. So that's the thought process there. Like I said, this really doesn't make any logical sense, but again, that's probably why we're doing it. So next week, or the next video, is actually going to be a fun little side project. It's kind of chicken truck related, but not really. But it's something I have to do, and it's going to take me quite a while to kind of put it together and get it going and whatever. So that's going to be the next video, and it might be a little late coming out, just depending on how much work is ahead of me. But I think some of you will probably enjoy it or get a kick out of it, or you might hate it. That's fine too. And once we get that done, then we can finally focus our attention back on this. We can start getting the box kind of mocked up. The plan for the summer is to get as much of the exterior sheet metal work kind of mocked up, just roughed in as we can, because I think, as I said earlier, in the winter I can't really get far enough away from this to stand back, and it's really important on these custom projects to be able to actually stand back and get a full visual of how it's going to look. So I want to get the sides kind of mocked up and the box mocked up, and just everything kind of in place where I think it's going to work together. And then over the winter we can start fine-tuning everything, getting a lot of the welding finished up, and just all the inner structure and all that nonsense, and the dash, and probably the front custom treatment, whatever we're doing at the front, we can do that over the winter. Same with the back, we can get the back all customized. But the summer is just going to be getting the overall vision kind of mocked up. So that's the plan going forward. This isn't going to be super low though, like holy man. As always, thanks so much for watching, everyone. And huge thank you to all the patrons of the show, and all the people who have been sending in donations via the super chat or through PayPal. It really is very much appreciated, and it really makes it possible for me to continue working on these custom or, you know, type projects, rather than just, you know, not making videos at all, I guess, is what we would have to do if it wasn't for them. So thanks so much to them. Very much appreciated here.